That would help. Hello, and welcome to another ohmTown Daily News Show. I am Mayor Watt. That is ohmTown.com. That's what powers the ohmTown Daily News Show. What is the ohmTown Daily News Show? It's the wrong date. Well, the ohmTown Daily News Show is an assortment. Sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once. It's an assortment of articles that are found throughout ohmTown.com. News that is aggregated constantly, and then every 24 hours I do a show. One of those shows is ohmTown Daily News Show, but I actually have 50 that are planned. I talk about it often over the last 9 months. I haven't been able to do much due to other things going on in ohmTown. But suffice it to say, there are 6 categories: create, news, education, entertainment, social, and technology. And then from there, a bunch of channels that I intend to bring. And you'll see some of those as we go through today's news. Got about 10 to 12 articles. That's kind of the standard now to fit in within a 1 hour show. And if I get into discussion with anybody in the chat, then we can go a little bit long, but let's just start where we are now. Okay, so the very first article is in the order of the grape. Driverless Waymo trucks in Texas transport over 1 million pounds of Modelo and Corona. I'm not sure if anybody even realizes that out there. I didn't. I certainly hadn't heard about this. A driverless truck recently hauled over 1 million pounds of Mexican beer across the state of Texas, according to Bloomberg. It's part of a months-long test with autonomous Waymo trucking vehicles. This might have popped into the news because Tesla recently said that it's going to be shipping out. It's maybe not shipping. It's going to be automatically driving its electric trucks out. I don't know if they're going to be fully autonomous vehicles, but Waymo vehicles are, and they're smaller versions of the Waymo vehicles that are driving people around without a driver. And now the trucking vehicle is out there as well. Constellation, the massive drinks conglomerate that owns brands such as Modelo and Corona, is using driverless trucking software to transport its beer. They say beers. I feel weird. The plural, it's like fish. It's not fishes. I'm not sure why beers is beers and not just beer. And 2 beers is not 2 beers. It's 2 beer. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Alphabet Incorporated's driverless vehicle Waymo, which is basically Google, recently transported stock from Houston to Dallas using trucking companies C.H. Robinson Worldwide Incorporated and Waymo via the pilot program, which began in April, involves over 220 miles of driving each day. Not bad, not bad. This article is actually over at vinepair.com. Nicolette Baker, and because of the source, it actually got thrown in the order of the grape. But this is more a tech thing, so my aggregator grabbed it. Not much else in here. It says currently the driver sits behind the Waymo wheel for safety as the trucks navigate the often foggy and rainy Texas highways. In the future, may not be the case. Nicolette Baker and VinePair put this together. I think this is a great article to show that technology and automated driving still needs a human component to it. At some point, I think that the gap between the start 1 mile and the last mile are going to end up, and basically it should be referred to as the last mile. On both ends of a 220 mile trip really should be a human. So the fine motor skills, the fidelity can be deployed. A human has better judgment than a computer in certain instances, usually the anomalous ends where they're driving in inner city and trying to wedge between this part and that part, and the technology just hasn't risen to the level yet. But technology will eventually even surpass that last mile part. That said, I think autonomy, or I should say autonomous driving, is going to be taking these long haul jobs, in the sense that you need to be a highly skilled driver. The only problem is going to be, those other anomalous moments where somebody does something completely out of band from what the automated driving system understands. And at some point, there was even instances where rainwater, water, snow, hail obliterate the ability for the autonomous driving system to understand where it is in space, and it ends up shutting down. My vehicle has sensors around it, and when it rains too hard, it loses its mind. It shuts down its automated, its vehicle detection systems. So quite interesting that this is still underway, and I endorse it. But I think drivers, truck drivers, long haul drivers are still a very important element. If we can get away from the fuel, then it makes even better sense. I don't know, the infrastructure can even handle it right now to put trucks into the electric sector. But electric vehicles is pretty much the future. So we better get trucking on it. Har har. Let me throw this link into chat. If you haven't been here before, you can now do !S and then pretty much whatever you want, and it'll get thrown into Showbot. And then at the end of the show, I gather up the information. You can check on boxes, check on articles to let me know that you liked the article in a more concise way than even in chat. Although right now it's not like I'm being overwhelmed by chat. But when you do this ! And then whatever you want to say, I'll see it at the end of the show. And if you do ! Showbot, it will throw up the link where you can go to ohmTown.showbot.tv and vote for the articles that you liked. This next article is in Aerith, and I did not throw the right thing in the right order into the right chat. So there's the article about driverless trucks. So they're going to be out of order in the Showbot. At any rate, this next article is in Aerith, which is about RPG world building. And this is RPGs coming next week. And it comes from rpgfan.com. I'll just skip over the little snippet and take us right to it. Tom Cox over at rpgfan.com wrote this article. I won't go through the whole thing. I encourage you to follow the link and go over there and check it out yourself. But the list of upcoming RPGs that they're talking about is Alfred Hitchcock Vertigo, coming out on October 4th for the PlayStation 5, Xbox, PlayStation, Switch. They break it down a little bit more, but... and if you don't know about Alfred Hitchcock Vertigo, go over to the article, check it out. I'm just going to tease you all with it. Blood Nova, October 5th for Windows. Mana Finder, October 5th for Windows. I'm curious about the artwork for Mana Finder. I didn't see a little snippet of in-game play, so I would be curious about what it looks like. Revalia Dungeon Raiders, October 5th for PlayStation 5 and 4 and Windows. I don't know why they break it out that much, but if you're only coding now for past iterations of a PlayStation, then you're you're hurting yourself. Anyone who's doing game development. Anyway, it comes out for PlayStation 5, 4, and Windows. Chaos Head Noah and Chaos Child is a double pack that's coming out October 7th on the Switch. Looks like it has some cool artwork. I like animation style games. Nier Automata, the End of Yorha edition, comes out October 6th on the Switch. These are all this last week, so I'm not sure really why the article really is this old. I don't know. Anyway, they say compared to the last few weeks, this one's a little quieter on the RPG front. Honestly, they're a little relieved. There are so many games coming out nowadays that it's impossible to keep up, especially if you're like the author of this article and have a tendency to replay really long games. And they talk about Persona 5 and Breath of the Wild. Anyway, I'm really into RPGs, so anything coming out that's fun, I'll probably end up playing at least a little bit of. This next article is a complete 180 from where we are now in terms of articles and their topics. This is a woman confesses to murdering her sister for flirting with her boyfriend in Valorant. And that's why it made it into the news. Otherwise, this would have been something that is really just very, very isolated. And unfortunately, it's a common occurrence, people getting killed. But this took place because the sister flirted with the boyfriend in Valorant. An Orlando woman has admitted to murdering her sister for flirting with her boyfriend in Valorant. The Orlando Sentinel reports 21-year-old Fatiha Marzan was arrested. Well, they named her. That's interesting. Normally, until they're convicted, I don't think that they name them. Normally, they say like Florida man or Florida woman. Anyway, was arrested by Orange County deputies on the evening of September 26th after calling police to report and confess to the crime about 15 hours after it happened. Marzan is reported to have shared a room and bed with her 20-year-old sister, Seema, who was a Valorant player. Investigators say that Marzan regularly witnessed her long-distance boyfriend and her sister playing the game together and perceived chat messages between the two as inappropriately flirtatious. Marzan repeatedly confronted them both regarding their relationship. It seems that she never stopped regarding the pair's bond as a threat. Wow. Well, this is one of those moments where you have to look at it and say, there are things that start out as online and then transcend into the real world, and that's when you have to wonder what's going on. For the most part, I have continued to think that, things online, people think that they can get away with whatever they're getting away with, that it's online and it stays online. But when it transcends into the real world, it becomes a whole level higher of threat. A lot of people talk a lot of garbage online. We just talked the other day about two adults, and I'm not talking about like a 21-year-old adult. I'm talking about people that have arguably seen some stuff, and kind of, not to say that everybody who's 21 doesn't see some stuff, but there are people out there that are battling over things that shouldn't matter to the other person, other than being a champion for the cause, but they talk a lot of stuff online at each other, and then they take the information that they find out about somebody and they dox them, and then other creepy people go and find these people and do stuff to them in the real world. It's so bizarre to me that anybody should be willing to do this kind of stuff. And it's not about, I could buy into protesting in the real world, that somebody isn't a champion for a particular cause. As I've said in the past, and I'll say it again in the future, I'm sure, one person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist. But, protesting a restaurant for abusing their employees is completely different than doxing somebody because you don't like the way that they feel about gender. In the sense, and I even have to put a caveat on this, in the sense that the person is more embracing of diversity versus the person who is doxing someone else because they are embracing someone. I'm not sure if I'm making myself clear here. Just like this could have been completely innocent, and they're just playing a game together. And even if it wasn't innocent, somebody flirting with somebody does not mean go and kill them. You don't cause harm in other people's life because of an opinion difference. There's a big difference when you start doxing people and aligning them as a threat to children and other things. The reason why I'm framing all of this together is because of the fact that it's transcending online into the real world, and people are causing great harm in the real world. And I say the real world because it is fundamentally different. I can turn off a computer and I can bow out of this space. I have to worry about the physical space. It's hard to, it's hard to cause great. No, I can't even say that either. So I'm gonna move on. My thoughts are not cogent enough for me to argue this point just yet. But believe me, I do have I do have the moments where the clarity is there. So at any rate, this next article. Dun dun dun. Hold on a second. Let me get all of this in order. Okay. So this next article that I was talking about, a woman confesses to murdering sister for flirting with her boyfriend in Valorant, is written by Joshua Bolins. And this person looks like they could be 12, for crying out loud. And she murdered somebody. It's ridiculous. This is mind-boggling that somebody would do this. I won't go into the article because there really isn't much to it. Suffice it to say that the person is now being held without bond and faces a first-degree murder charge. He's confessed to the event but waited 15 hours afterward. So let's move on to the next article. This next article is in Law Nerd because I am an aspiring one, I guess you could say. I'm just going to click the link and take us over to bar examiners are very interested in a Reddit confession of cheating on an exam. Of course, bar examiners are investigating. That's what happens when a bar cheating confession goes viral. I'm actually going to click the link. This is in Above the Law. Joe Patrice is the author of this. And surprising exactly no one, Illinois is looking into a recent Reddit post confessing to cheating on the bar exam. The post, purportedly by UIC John Marshall graduate who previously failed twice and passed this time by abusing accommodations for ADHD, gives away a lot of identifiable information, and the Board of Admissions is on the case. I'm going to read this quote because this is more public information. The Illinois Board of Admission to the bar is aware of this post and appropriate steps are being taken. Nancy Vincent, Director of Administration for Illinois Board of Admissions to the bar, said in an email to law.com Thursday. The board takes very seriously its responsibility to the Illinois Supreme Court, to the legal community, to its applicants, and to the public, Vincent said. I really wish that was completely inverted, but okay. While it's not mandatory to investigate every allegation, when matters that may affect the integrity of the exam or the character of the applicant are brought to our attention, the board will take all appropriate steps. So if someone suspects that someone is cheating, they may not care. Anyway, we remain very skeptical that Burner Man 1818 cheated on the exam, or for that matter, even took the exam. The loaf worth of breadcrumbs left in the post seems awfully suspicious. Unless Burner is immeasurably stupid, it feels as though the post was designed to put a target on someone else. In any event, the bar examiners are looking into it. So if somebody did cheat, this person may have been privy to copious amounts of information about it, and thus could be painting a target, I suppose. Okay, so let's move on to the next article. Again, if you type an exclamation point showbot, you can get taken over to, or just go to ohmTown.showbot.tv, and you can vote on articles. The next article is in the Daily News Show. That's this show. It just happens to be a channel on ohmTown.com as well. All of the shows that I propose are NASCAR shows danger of airborne lead during pregnancy. I have long been talking about the fact that I think a lot of illnesses, primarily sociopathy, can be correlated and maybe find causation between lead and heavy metal poisoning. So it says here, even short-term exposure to airborne lead during pregnancy could lead to adverse birth outcomes, according to new research. For the study, the researchers took a unique approach to reach their findings. They examined birth data near a NASCAR speedway. You see, the Environmental Protection Agency began phasing out leaded gasoline for most of the United States in the 1970s, and it was fully phased out by 1996. So a tremendous amount of time for lead poisoning to continue to happen, except for a few exceptions. Airplane fuel, some industrial processes, and NASCAR. So the exception was made for NASCAR because at the time, their cars couldn't sustain high-speed endurance races without leaded gas. Yes, the speed would suffer, and thus everybody else had to suffer because they couldn't lower the speed to be fun and engaging. So people probably unknowingly, because I'm sure there weren't ample warnings saying in this area you will be intaking lead for an extended period of time, and even microparticles of lead can lead to negative birth outcomes and long-term damage, including, even now we know, sociopathy. So when we click the link, we get taken here. This is at futurity.org, and Jarrett Banks Brandeis is the author of this article. And I think, because I've read about this before, I don't know exactly everything that's going to be in this article. But what it comes down to is near airports, there are, negative birth outcomes, as are now NASCAR. And the Centers for Disease Control has been lowering the amount of acceptable lead over the years, and now we're down to something like 3.5 micrograms, and I still think that isn't enough. So when a plane flies over you and airports and around NASCAR and around certain other industrial facilities, you do get, I'll say, peppered with lead. And I think that is just disastrous for society, because it goes well beyond just negative birth outcomes. The long-term damage of heavy metal poisoning Once it's in you, it's impossible to get it out of you, and it deposits itself in the brain. So it says 100 grams may seem insignificant when they're talking about birth weight, but previous research found survival rates increased from 62 to 79% for infants born at 600 grams compared to 700 grams. I don't like the way that they wrote this. It's confusing, but when a baby is born at 700 grams, their survival rate is nearly 80%, which is still overall a low birth weight. But, as a parent, you'll take it, right? Because you want your kid to be born happy and healthy. Unfortunately, when there is lead when there is lead involved, this translates into the child as well. So because it's bloodborne. So I think that it's an ongoing issue. Additional co-authors from the San Diego State University, Cornell University, the Environmental Protection Agency, National Center for Environmental Economics, and Appalachian State University and Brandeis all worked together to put this research study together, not the article. So this is not something that's just isolated in a silo of somebody's bias. So this next article is over in the Hatch Ideas channel. Let's throw that up there. Art expert has been fired after he valued a Chinese vase at $1,950. That sold at auction for nearly $8 million. I can't count how many times somebody gets a quote from somebody, but this is quite interesting. A Chinese vase that sold at auction in France for $7.8 million was actually valued at only $1,950. The art expert in France has been fired after valuing a Chinese vase 4,000 times less than its sale price. The vase belonged to a woman. Well, I wouldn't use them as a consultant anymore, that's for sure. But I would find out what their subject matter expertise is and maybe use them for that, because Chinese vases from history or vases, when it's above, I think, like $70, it becomes a vase. Anyway, the vase belonged to a woman who sold it after clearing out her mother's belongings, according to The Guardian. It's not clear what drove the buyer to pay so much for the vase or what makes it so special. The art expert has been fired from the prestigious auction house after valuing that Chinese vase 4,000% less, or times less, not percent. Bethany Dawson over at BusinessInsider.com is who wrote the article. I'm not quite sure. I guess it doesn't really matter. I mean, it says the woman sold it after clearing the mother's belongings out. The way that the snippet said, it implied that it was sold for $1,950, and then somebody priced it at 7.8 in the auction. But that's not really how it works. Let's see if there's something else in here. Yeah, the vase was sold at, I guess it's Osanat, after a woman from Brittany was clearing her mother's house and decided to part ways with the vase, which once belonged to her grandmother, according to The Guardian. Yeah, I'd like to know the provenance of this listing. The listing describes the vase as a large Tianqi-ping porcelain and polychrome, interesting, enamel vase in the style of blue-white with globular body and long cylindrical neck decorated with 9 fierce dragons and clouds. Let's see, I want to look at this vase again. It looks pretty. Pardon me one second. Sorry about that. So the expert who analyzed the piece believed the vase was merely a 20th century decoration and decided it couldn't be worth more than $1,950. But Osanat realized this might not be the case when their pre-auction showing was swamped with interested buyers who told The Guardian came to inspect the vase with lamps and magnifying glasses. He said there were so many registrations, we had to stop them. At that point, we understood something was happening. The seller was greeted with a huge shock when the vase, which her family had put flowers in, sold for the astronomical price. Well, that's what a vase is for. So it's as if she has won the Euro Millions. It's not clear what drove the buyer to pay so much for the vase. So I'm really curious as to what it was that made somebody maybe it has a treasure map in it, or it's going to lead us to the kingdom of the crystal skulls. I'm not really sure what, but that's some serious change for that vase. The next article is in the Hatch Ideas channel, and that's because it's basically about business. We've all heard stories about Spirit Halloween, but Spirit Halloween opens 1,450 pop-up shops across North America as consumers prepare to spend a record $10.6 billion on holiday. U.S. consumers are expected to spend a record $10.6 billion on Halloween this year. I think it's all pent-up irrational exuberance, but for some reason, I don't think that they're going to come close to 10.6 billion, but we'll see. Die-hard Halloween fans are increasingly investing more time and money in the spooky season. Spirit Halloween has opened up nearly 1,500 stores and expects to hire 35,000 people. No one takes Halloween more seriously than haunters, self-identified Halloween fanatics who spend, in some cases, thousands of dollars every year to beef up their collection of decorations, costumes, and larger-than-life animatronics. I actually have somebody in my pathway around my neighborhood, around my existence. I'll be nebulous about that, where they have purchased. They have to have spent several $1,000s per decoration. Skeleton horses, skeleton dinosaurs, skeleton skeletons, human skeletons that are sitting in every seat of a gazebo that they have, and I think it's like a 10-person gazebo, and countless other things in their yard. And I guess that in the previous year, none of that existed. So I'm pretty sure either the house sold and somebody else took it and did this with it, or that person is what this article is talking about and has become a haunter. Sarah Bell Lynn is the author of this over at businessinsider.com. And I don't know if there's going to be much more in this. National Retail Foundation found in its 2022 survey that spending on Halloween costumes, candy, decorations, parties, and pumpkins is expected to reach a record $10.6 billion this year, surpassing last year's record of $10.1 billion. I find that number even more amazing. I also find this video over here on the other side of them moving a plane with cranes, and one of the things is one of the cranes has it like a strap underneath the front of the plane, and that I don't know why that frightens me, because unless all three of the cranes that are lifting this thing are holding it in unison, you'd think that it's going to snap. It's not designed to have pressure right there, but hey, I'm not the engineer. Anyway, back to the article. The projection is largely driven by younger millennials, 87% of whom are expected to celebrate Halloween this year, a foundation spokesperson told Insider. Not bad, not bad. And then they have pictures of these young haunters, which, all right, that's fine. But people are getting really into Halloween this year. I kind of feel that, but I don't know about 10.1 billion this year. We shall see. And good on Halloween, Spirit Halloween, for being ready to take advantage of this. They move into old big box stores for the most part when the big box store collapsed. So this next article is in the Hatch Ideas channel. Pardon me 1 second. 4 reasons people still follow toxic bosses. Psychologist says, quote, "We're keeping them in power." Ronald Riggio, a leadership professor at Claremont McKenna College, says there are 4 reasons why people follow bad bosses. They all have to do with psychology. Let's go over to the article. Hopefully it all works. Annika Kim Constantino is the author of this over at CNBC. And I'm really interested in the 4, so let's get right to it. People confuse arrogance and narcissism for strength. Yeah, I've seen that. The loudest gets the mostest. You don't necessarily have to be good, as long as you... Well, I mean, it helps in some careers to pretend to know what you're doing. Number 2, people fall into cognitive laziness. If you've never had a bad boss, you've probably thought to yourself, I don't want to go through the effort of figuring out how to handle that situation. It sounds exhausting. I know the feeling. And it's not even limited to bosses, by the way. This makes it sound like it's just bosses that people have to deal with. We all know that that's not the case. Instead, you have to find ways to convince yourself that your boss is actually fine. Riggio calls the feeling cognitive laziness. I don't know if that's what you would call it. More like coping mechanism. They're in a position of authority and you are not. It's not like you can protest your boss, so you either go along to get along or you bow out of that business. People equate good results with good leadership. Yeah, that happens around everybody. I totally buy into that. And people enjoy the power of association. Bosses often hold power within the company or group. Riggio says some people enable and assist a manager's worst attributes in the hopes of getting rewarded for loyalty, like a promotion or pay raise. Yeah, well, humans will sell their soul for $1. Literally, we're burning down the house to get more money, yet we won't have the shelter of the house. That's what people do. A bad leader attracts henchpersons who surround them because they're being connected to a powerful person. Oh, look around. None of that applies, right? And the next article is in the Daily News Show. Despite calls for diplomacy to end war, U.S. confirms more weapons headed to Ukraine. I'm pretty sure that this is a Common Dreams article because that article title pretty much is inflammatory. It's clickbaity. I read their articles mainly to get a perspective from a different angle. I don't quite understand this title. It says, again, it's over by commondreams.org, written by Brett Wilkins, and the title is Despite Calls for Diplomacy to End War, U.S. Confirms More Weapons Headed to Ukraine. And then it has this little section underneath it. Are there still negotiation possibilities? Asked Noam Chomsky. There's only one way to find out. That's to try. If you refuse to try, of course, there's no option, no possibilities. But at this point, I don't know how you can have pardon me, I'm scratchy throat. I don't know how you can have a diplomatic solution to an invasion of the country, killing of people, annexation of the land in a hostile takeover type of event where a bunch of Russian people were pushed into regions and then everybody voted, just like what took place with Crimea. The only diplomatic solution would be for Russia to get the hell out of Ukraine and take the people from Crimea with them. I was flabbergasted when I read Elon Musk posting a picture of an old fascist takeover of Ukraine that no longer applied because the people wanted that person out. And the implication of the person that responded and Elon Musk is, well, the popularity driven mechanism is what matters here, but that's not really how it should work. Because like I said in the last episode, I talked about this, which might have been yesterday, maybe the day before, I don't know anymore. It doesn't matter if it's popular. There's a plurality of people there. The geographic regions, the political lines have been drawn. Ukraine is self-supporting. Crimea and the Donbas region, and there's another one, my brain just went blank. It's all part of Ukraine and should have remained Ukraine, but that's not how it is. They've invaded and taken it. You know, the numbnuts like Elon Musk's political disposition and geopolitical disposition, and the person that corrected him still failed to understand or make known, draw home the point that just because 50 plus 1 in a given region have been stacked into place to represent that 50 plus 1 and thus a different perspective, doesn't mean that a piece of a country should be given to another country. It would be like a bunch of people that are politically aligned through whatever affiliation with Mexico decided to hold a vote and let Mexico annex back Southern California and portions of Texas and New Mexico. Are you insane, people? Are you insane? Just because of a infusion of a particular mindset in a place does not mean that that place needs to change entirely. But that is the game that people are playing. That is why the deck is stacked in the Supreme Court. That's why local governments are stacked by people who are sociopathic, who think that only their will is the right will, and it's a silo, it's a vertical, it's a walled garden of their own creation, and only they can play in it, so everybody else has to be kicked out. Whereas the other side of the argument is openness, inclusion, transparency, engagement, opportunity, more for more. Not this xenophobic, sociopathic, wingnut perspective that might makes right. You have to be fundamentalist religion. You have to be extremist. You have to be loud. You have to throw vitriol everywhere. And believe me, what I'm saying isn't vitriol. Oh, and don't forget, you have to gaslight. You have to gaslight everybody. Let's move on to the next article. The stock market is headed for a new 2022 low in October after strong jobs report strengthens the Fed's case for more hawkish rate hikes, B of A says. I'm just going to click that link and take us straight on over to Business Insider, where Matthew Fox writes this article, and it says here, the U.S. economy added 263,000 jobs last month, and the unemployment rate dipped to 3.5%. I think, again, the reporting of that number, not by Business Insider, but the source, which is the federal, it's all bogus. The number is gamed. There might be a whole bunch more jobs, but we're at the bottom of the barrel, and 3.5% is just a BS number. Only question for investors is hard landing or soft landing in 2023. We say hard landing, B of A says. This is what I've been saying, that the problem, the pain, arguably at the pump, is going to land dead center of the middle class and pull it down even further, while the upper class, the people who are making hundreds of millions of dollars, even through the pain and suffering of the pandemic, and maybe because of the pandemic, the producers are going to be making bank regardless, because they are the ones that give us mere mortals a job, something to do other than, just be lazy. Well, the U.S. economy added 263,000 jobs. I'd like to see them. And says that the unemployment rate dipped. The jobs report only bolstered the Federal Reserve's view that the policymakers need to continue to hike interest rates to soften the economy and tame inflation. Yeah, mortgages are above 7%, even for those with perfect credit. Try to buy a car, and you'll see how much more you have to pay now. Try to buy a house. Good luck. You better have 100% of the cash ready, or that mortgage is going to be $7,000 for a $350,000 house. I'm being hyperbolic. Anyway, the report basically says the Fed is doing right, and I think that you're going to end up with another 0.25. I might even push to 0.5. I don't know how often they ever do like a third of a point, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's upward of that, if they make that distinction between 0.5 and 0.25. It might end up in the 0.33 range if they do that. I think they like round numbers, so they've goosed it on the 0.75 earlier, and now they're going to sandbag the 0.25. But I guarantee you that the middle class is going to be the one that suffers, not the ultra rich. And finally, the last article for today is renewable energy. Government plans to price cap is risky, firms say. This article is over in the Hatch Ideas channel again, and I think that this is going to be bad. It's going to suppress renewable energy adoption if you put a price cap. We've seen this in other countries where a price cap, some business control, it's an economic control, but it's socially driven. The plans could hit the profits of energy companies including SSE, Scottish Power, RWE, EDF Energy. So this is over in the UK, but it's a BBC article, but the same applies everywhere. We have seen this controls being put in place in other countries, and when it happens, you're going to have problems. So if you cap the price, then profits, prices, therefore inflation comes down. The latter is a key attraction to the government, which is 500 billion pounds in debt. The electricity producers are lobbying hard against this and warn that an intervention like this has several risks. Firstly, it'll reduce the incentive for energy retailers to buy in advance, creating a less predictable, more volatile market. Well, that's what that translates into is they won't be able to generate enough power when the price gets too high. They won't be able to produce the power. They won't be able to get the power. And it really depends on which sector you're talking about. Secondly, they've already sold most of what they expect to produce this year and next. Any government haste to tinker with contracts already signed could cause market disruptions at a time when the volatile economic weather can magnify market dislocations into major crises, energy firms say. Basically, all of this means that there is going to be some massive business sector blowback from capping energy, because it's going to end up costing, maybe removing the profit margin between where these contracts are sold and the actual consumption, and they won't produce more energy than what they have already priced out as an estimate of what is going to be consumed for the year. So you're going to end up with things like what's going on in South Africa and in other countries where you get blackouts, brownouts, shutdowns, rolling blackouts, like what happened in California, where surge pricing wasn't allowed for a time, then it was. Massive profits were gained, but Enron was just a poison pill to the economy anyway, to the local economy. And I'm not really sure how many people were actually charged in that, but everybody that benefited from it is a scumbag. And this is going to be the same way. You shut down regions because your profit margins are no longer 35%, and you're a scumbag. Plain and simple. You price what you price your material at, and that's what it is. You don't stop producing your medicine because the profit margin no longer is 35% versus 15%. You're still making money as a business, and it's still sustainable because your profit margin is the cost of everything. And when prices change, you change your price, but you don't sit there and become exploitive. But in this particular instance, you have the government coming down and saying you can't raise prices above this, and if the cost of getting the material and producing it is that ceiling, it's a lose-lose everywhere. And obviously somebody needs to be educated on what the price differential is between the price cap and where it's being produced at. It has to have context. But we'll see. We'll keep an eye out, and we'll talk about it in the next episode of the ohmTown Daily News Show. That's it for today. I got this done in an hour. I'll see you tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern. And we'll go over the next 24 hours of news. Only a sampling. You'll have to go to ohmTown.com to get the full thing. I'd say 18 hours in, there was about 20 pages worth of news. A good 35, 40 pages worth of news came in 24 hours. And that's only from the article sources that are currently being aggregated. There's a lot of news, folks, a lot of news. Information overload is real. That's why I kind of grabbed some articles and hope to have a fun discussion here in ohmTown. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye-bye.